It's been quite a while since I last looked at a Diamond Select Star Wars figure in the 7-inch scale. In fact, I think it was Christmas when I looked at the Boba Fett and Stormtrooper figures, and to be honest, it's a little bit of a mystery how they release these figures because they're pretty difficult to track down, or at least they seem to be in the UK. This is another Disney Store exclusive, and it's another fan favourite because it's Chewbacca. I really quite like this range. When I was doing my reviews of the Boba Fett and the Stormtrooper figure, I was really impressed with them. I think they've done a tremendous job with them. I was really excited for them to release more in the line. I'm aware they already released their Darth Maul figure, and it would have been nicer to see them expand into some more of the established characters like Darth Vader, Han Solo, and of course Luke Skywalker and Leia. Sadly, those characters don't seem to have materialised yet, so Chewbacca was a bit of a surprise to me. And don't get me wrong, I love Chewbacca, but he does feel a little bit lonely without Han Solo. And I would have thought in the order of release you would probably bank on Han Solo before Chewbacca, but hey, I don't know what the business decision is around this. Needless to say, I'm really glad that we finally have another figure in this line. I just wish they'd produce a few more in the year for me to get my hands on, because I overall really like these figures so far. So let's see if that holds true for Chewbacca. Now, I must admit, as much as I love this line, one of the things I'm not overly impressed with is the packaging design. It's very, very bland. As we can see, it is just basically black borders. There's a Star Wars logo front and centre, which is nice, I suppose, but it is pretty basic, and then we have the character's name at the very bottom. There's really not a lot of decoration. It's not very displayable. It is mostly window display, and it's nice to see the character in there on display, and the figure itself looks nice, but the background, the inner tray is a grey, dull colour, which isn't very exciting. It doesn't help the figure pop out of the packaging per se, and it's nice because in the background it does have the Rebellion logo, but I just wish this had been more colourful. I wish that logo had been a brilliant, bright red, a solid colour. That would have helped the figure just kind of stand out a bit more, but as it is, this just looks a little bit dull, and it's not really very displayable. Things improve slightly on the side panel because we have this image of Chewbacca, and this time they've actually opted for a photograph of the character from one of the films, which is cool. I really like this. In previous releases we've seen the action figure. Again, nothing wrong with that approach. I think consistency is important, so it would be nice if they use the same method for all of them, so when you put them on display they look consistent on the shelf. But I think this works pretty well. Again, it's not the most dynamic or diverting packaging. It's not really going to draw the eye too much if it's on the shelf, but having this character display and having them lined up with others in the series would look pretty cool. And then finally we have the reverse of the packaging, which again just continues this trend of being pretty dull all round really. We have this pretty much just a black space, we have some very small print there which isn't really telling us anything about the character or the universe, it's just licensing information, and we have some sort of blueprint design of the action figure and his accessories. It's not even colourful images of the figure itself. So I think this is very dull, this is a very minimalist approach, and overall I'm not into it, I've got to be honest. Thankfully, things improve dramatically once we remove the figure from the packaging. As you can see, this is very nicely painted. I think that's the most striking thing about it, is that we can see already lots of different textures to Chewbacca's body, and that looks really good. Now, in terms of sculpting, I'm not sure which version of Chewbacca this is meant to be, from what movie specifically it's supposed to come from. I get the impression this is meant to be a coverall for any of the films, and to be fair, Chewbacca's look doesn't change a great deal between the original Star Wars trilogy and the Disney trilogy all those years later, but there are subtle differences. But all in all, I'm pretty happy with this sculpt. It's fairly generic, but I think it works really well. It's definitely recognisable as Chewbacca. It's distinctly Chewbacca, not just any Wookiee. I think this looks pretty cool. I love the colouring. I think the sculpting is very nicely done, and it is complemented with really good paint apps. As I said, there's different shades here, and it creates a sense of texture to this character, which is important for his fare. It gives him a more realistic look and feel. The same is true for the body sculpting. Again, very nicely sculpted. Lots of fine detail here when it comes to his hair and those wavy lines. Looks really good. And the paint apps are really excellent. We can see, obviously, the different browns and blacks and greys, which work really well. Thankfully, his bandana is not sculpted in, it is a separate piece, so it does have that flexibility for movement, and it is also very nicely sculpted and very well painted. So again, this looks really worn, it looks like it's got its own texture, which is great. And again, we can see a number of different paint washes running through this to just really give it that extra texture, extra levels of detail there. Now, it goes without saying, of course, this is a brand new sculpt for this line. There aren't too many Wookiees in the Star Wars universe, and we certainly don't have any other Wookiees in this line. So nothing has been recycled here, everything is brand new. So of course he has longer limbs than we'd see on the standard 7-inch scale action figure, and we can see he's got these brand new sculpted hands as well. One is a trigger finger and one is an open hand. Likewise in his legs and his feet, again, completely brand new and of course moulded and sculpted, especially for this release, and it looks pretty good all in all. They've really captured the look of the fare and the texture and detail there very nicely. Unfortunately, Chewbacca fares less well when it comes to articulation. Yeah, that sculpted hair there definitely hinders his articulation. Let's look at the head joint here. There is a ball joint here. In theory, he should be able to turn his head from side to side, look up and down, but because of that long, hard plastic beard, he's not really getting much movement. You can just about turn it from side to side, but it's not comfortable, it doesn't look great, and let's be honest, you're going to have him facing front all the time. He's got ball joints in his shoulders though, and that does allow plenty of range of movements. He can move his arms up and out a really healthy distance, which is great, and this is complemented by a lower arm swivel at the elbow, so he can spin his lower arm 360 degrees and he can hinge it to 90, which is great. There is another joint at the wrist, which again, you can move this from side to side. You can probably get it all the way around, but it's a little bit stiff, it doesn't look quite right, and there's not really much movement when it comes to the wrist either. So all in all, this looks a little bit clunky and it doesn't work quite the way it's intended. Sadly, there's no waist or ab articulation whatsoever. He does have a hinge at the hips, so he can kick his legs out to the side, and he can kick his legs forwards. He can't really get them to go backwards at all, but he does have another swivel at the knee this time. So again, he can bend his knee to roughly 90 degrees, and he can swivel that lower leg all the way around as well, which is pretty healthy. Now, he does have a ball joint in the ankle, but you're not really going to be able to get much out of this. You can just about get it to move forwards and backwards, but you can't get it to hinge from left to right. There's very, very little range of motion here. I'm pleased to say that Diamond Select have thought this through a little bit in terms of the accessories, and they've given Chewbacca quite a range of accessories, which is pretty fun. So of course, he has his standard bandana, as we've already seen, but he also has this alternate bandana, which offers a completely different look for Chewbacca. I can't remember which movie this one is from, but really cool to have the option to have both of these and create two different looks for this character, which is really cool. And again, this bandana is very nicely sculpted and well painted. As you'd expect, he also comes with his trusty bowcaster as well. Again, this is very nicely sculpted, and the paint apps are really nice as well. They haven't just moulded it in a base black plastic, they've given it a nice grey wash as well in certain places to make it look like it's been well used and seen some action. And then he also comes with this shotgun effect. Again, I can't remember which film he uses this in, but really cool to see it. Nicely sculpted and nicely painted again. I think it's really cool that we have the option to have a very different look for Chewbacca, both the bandana and his weapon choice here. I think this looks really cool. It's nice to have that diversification and have multiple looks for the one action figure. I think this works pretty well. This isn't my personal favourite, but the bandana fits him nice and snugly for the most part and looks pretty good when it's on. And this weapon here looks the part. It's a little bit loose in terms of his grip, is the only criticism I have of it, but it slots in well enough and you can get it to pose in multiple positions, which looks pretty effective. And of course, here we have him with his classic look, that bandana, and of course the bowcaster, which is how I always think of Chewbacca. This is always going to be my default, personally, but I think this looks really good. This fits much better in his hand. The only criticism I would have is that I really struggled to get the bowcaster to rest into his open palm, on the other hand, which is a shame. It would have been nice if this fitted together a bit better. Now, you might be able to persevere and get it into place, but I really struggled with it personally. Now, Chewbacca is roughly to scale, which is fantastic news, and here he is standing next to the Boba Fett from this line that we saw earlier in the year. So again, we can see that these figures are in scale. They look pretty good together. This looks pretty accurate in the main. It might be fractionally off, but this looks pretty healthy all in all. Chewbacca is a good couple of inches taller than the other figures in this line so far, which is fantastic, and obviously it looks the part. So then, final thoughts from me. Well, I'm going to give him 3 stars. Now, that's not to say this is a bad figure by any stretch of the imagination. It's very good. I think the overall sculpt is excellent, and I love the paint apps. I think they've done a tremendous job of those. I really like his accessories too, and I like that we have 2 different looks for this character. Unexpected and a fun touch. So, they're definitely this figure's strengths, and I think it is a good figure overall, but there's a couple of things that really hold it back for me personally. The key one is the articulation, because sadly this just doesn't work at all in some places. Not having any sort of waist or ab articulation is a little bit of a disappointment. It's not strictly necessary, and I appreciate that it might affect the aesthetic of the figure having unsightly joints in that area, but I think they could have maybe used a sort of soft sort of plastic or rubber over for the torso for the fair effect, and still had that articulation underneath. That would have been a compromise, and sadly they didn't go for that route. It's a real shame that we can't move his head in any other position particularly either. I know the functionality is there, but it doesn't work practically in real terms. It's also disappointing that he can't hold his bowcaster with both hands. So there's these little things that sort of pull it back a little bit for me. And I also think it's a shame that we didn't get an alternate head, perhaps a roaring, yelling head. That would have been really cool for this character in particular. So I think that, again, that was another missed opportunity here. So all in all, this is a pretty nice figure. It's a nice one to add to this line, to this collection. Chewbacca wouldn't have been my first choice. I would have much preferred a Darth Vader or a Han Solo before Chewbacca, but hey, this is a very welcome addition. I just hope we get to see some of these other characters and round out this collection soon. If you enjoyed this video, please do give it a like, and remember to subscribe, as there'll be plenty more videos soon.